It's great to see you all once again. Thank you for having me. And as we join Mr. Mariano Browne, former Senator, Minister in the Ministry of Finance, commentator, economist, and the list goes on and on. Today we are talking on the economy, a subject on the agenda of several social media platforms, news releases, the man on the street. Families' lives are affected. Mr. Browne, welcome to Hotline with Dookie on IETV.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me.
Yes. Before we delve into the questions I had about the economy for Trinidad and Tobago, off air, I mentioned to you it's a bit off the radar question, but it directly affects us as well. The U.S. attack on Iran, you were mentioning something to be about methanol. Do you think it is good or bad for us?
Well, let's put it this way. We export energy products, and the developments in the Far East affect the supply of those products to the rest of the world. And whenever supply is disoriented, or alternatively there are hiccups in the supply, then prices go up. That has worked to Trinidad and Tobago's benefit at least once before, and certainly what established us, gave us our first boom, was in fact the boycott by OPEC oil countries, which forced up energy prices in 1974. From time to time, we've had dislocations in the market, and they have worked for Trinidad and Tobago, because when that happens, prices go up. Most recently, as part of the recovery from COVID, certainly with regard to the war in Ukraine, where there was a lot of uncertainty in the market and supply was cut off from the market, then the prices rose. And the best example of that is the price of ammonia, where the price of ammonia rose from somewhere around $450 a ton, per metric ton, to something in the region of $1,500 at its highest point. Now, that's 3 times the price. Now, that's when Trinidad and Tobago's depression ended, not because of any increase in production on our part. In fact, production didn't increase that year, it went down. But because prices rose. And that has a huge knock-on effect in terms of government revenue and the size of GDP. So, gross domestic product in terms of the national income. And as a result, Trinidad found itself on the way to a recovery path, out of a depression which had lasted when energy prices fell in 2014, both in oil, gas, and literally all energy prices fell. And Trinidad and Tobago went into depression. Our national income fell, and as well as government revenues. Government revenues fell from government expenditure, fell from about $59 billion in 2014 to just about $50 billion in 2015. And so that tells you that's a 20% decline because of the changes in prices. And the real revenue for Trinidad and Tobago in 2015, 2016 came up to about just about $42 billion. So there was quite a lot of borrowing at the time. So that what happens on the energy market is of great significance to Trinidad and Tobago, because it has the possibility of increasing our revenue significantly. Now, the point is, you can't run a country on the basis of somebody else going to war, right? So
some people are saying we are walking a thin line.
It is, right? So this is temporary. Any changes that are likely to take place, but it depends upon how long this war would last. Remember, on June the 12th last year, it lasted for 1 day. So right now, after it started on Saturday, so today's day 3, you can say it's 3 times as long as it was in June. But that didn't help us at all. So this one is likely to have more significance, because it also has led to the closure, or is leading to the closure of Hormuz, the Straits of Hormuz, through which 20% of the world's energy and oil supplies pass. And that means not only oil, it means natural gas, it means condensate, it means gasoline, and all different types of products. So when 20% of the world's energy resources passing through that particular point. That's a huge impact in terms of the market. The market for oil internationally is about 100 million barrels a day. Now, 20% of that means you're going down to 80. So you're going to have immediately the markets, as soon as hostility started, the prices started to move. The closure of Hormuz was more or less ratified, well, not ratified, I'll say it happened yesterday, where apparently one tanker was attacked, right? So if one tanker is attacked, the possibility of other tankers being attacked, or at least one, right, the possibility of other tankers being attacked is high. And in those circumstances, if you know that one, and because the Strait of Hormuz is very narrow, it's only about 33 miles. Now, 33 miles might sound a lot, but in terms of the size of an ocean, that's very small. And in those circumstances, it means that any ship passing through that area is at risk.
Right.
So you'll find that insurers, owners, vessel owners, for example, are not going to take the risk, especially if one tanker has been attacked or sunk. That's going to make it very problematical. So the net impact on that is going to be pretty quick, because oil is supplied, gas is supplied on the basis of what we call forward contracts. You can't wait for the oil to arrive today. What you have to have oil in storage. So what you require is a contract for delivery of oil within 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. The general market trend is about 90 days, so that you will get an increase in the price today for delivery in 90 days. That's going to have a more or less immediate impact in terms of what's going to take place now. The size of the impact, I haven't looked at the energy markets this morning, but I expect that the prices would have gone up substantially.
Which is to our benefit.
Which will work for Trinidad and Tobago's benefit, yes. I think on the Guardian this morning, both Minister Moonilal, who is the current Minister of Energy, as well as Mr. Stuart Young, the former Minister of Energy, both of them were indicating that they expected some sort of spike and some sort of benefit for Trinidad and Tobago. So I think we could look forward to that. But
yeah, they are all looking at positive things for Trinidad and Tobago.
Well, we are not a positive, not to what you call it, not to depend upon negative things happening to other people's economies for us to move up. But at the end of the day, given where we are and given some of our tight economic constraints, you're looking for help for wherever you could get it. All right? But one hopes that there will be some resolution in the Middle East, certainly within the next week or two. Because what happens after that, it may sound good for Trinidad and Tobago, but won't be very good for the world economy.
Yes, Minister Moonilal, just quoting him in this morning newspaper, he said LNG reform could deliver an energy windfall.
Well, yes, if the prices go up.
If the price is right, yes, that's right.
Because we aren't producing that much more. Right? And that's the real reason why the effort and the focus has been on Manatee and Dragon. The reality is that Trinidad has installed plant capacity for approximately 4.2 billion cubic feet of gas. And we're only producing at the moment 2.6 billion cubic feet. So that means we're more than 40% below maximum production.
We are below, yes.
And that's one of the reasons why we have plants which are closed.
Recently, Mr. Browne, another economist have put forward the idea that the UNC administration inherited a failing economy. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, to some extent that would be true, but the economy didn't fail yesterday. This failure is large. Let's put it this way. Let's look at the structure of the Trinidad and Tobago.
Sure.
All right. 80% of our foreign exchange comes from the energy sector. When I say energy sector, we've been making a distinction. We've been talking about manufacturing. The largest part of what we now claim as the managers of the manufacturing sector is in fact the manufacture of petrochemicals. So it's correctly positioned. We repositioned it as part of the manufacturing sector in terms of our statistical numbers in 2017. Right? So when we talk about manufacturing, that includes the petrochemical sector. But the petrochemical sector depends on natural gas, which is produced by what we would call mining, on exploration, which is a separate line item in our statistical numbers, right? And mining and refining is essentially production of natural gas and oil. Oil has been in long-term decline. In the 1970s, late 1970s, we were producing 240,000 barrels a day. Now we're producing less than 60,000 barrels a day. If you compare that to where Guyana is now approximating 1 million barrels a day. What made Trinidad and Tobago strong as an economy was that in the production, or when we realized or we found oil off the East Coast, we also found copious amounts of natural gas, which we have been monetizing. And the export of natural gas has amounted to, at its highest point, just under 1 million barrels of oils. That's when you convert in terms of the energy coefficient. It comes out to be about 1 million barrels of oil, where Guyana is today. In terms of our production at the moment is approximating 550 barrel oil equivalents on the basis of 2.6 billion cubic feet of gas a day. Right, so that's the rough equivalence. That's translated in terms. When we talk about 1 billion cubic feet of gas, that doesn't say a lot of things to other people. So if you translate it in terms of barrels of oil, that tells you what this looks like. Now, that's important for a small country. Our country's 1.5 million people. Now, Venezuela, for example, at its highest point, produced 3.5 million barrels of oil a day, which is approximately 3 times our production capacity, current production levels.
Right.
Venezuela had 30 million people. So it was an oil economy. It also had copious amounts of gas, which it never used. One of them, a field which was developed, which is pretty close to one of our fields, that's the Dragon field. That's one of the reasons why we have been negotiating, talking to Venezuela with regard to getting access to it, because our production of natural gas has been declining. So if you look at it, and that's the reason why, so 550,000 barrels of oil a day. Now, barrel of oil is equivalent to where we are at our highest point, somewhere in the region of 800,000 barrels of oil equivalent of gas being produced. Now, that's a rough calculation. That tells you where we are and how far we are. Now, what has also happened, of course, is that the price of natural gas has moderated. So not only has our production fallen, but the price has fallen. And that has a knock-on effect in terms of national income, has a knock-on effect in terms of foreign exchange generated, it has a knock-on effect in terms of oil and gas as a percentage of the national economy. So roughly, we still very much of an energy-dependent country, because when I say energy-dependent on the energy sector, because it accounts for 80% of our foreign exchange, 80-90% of our foreign exchange, not a little bit, and then approximately 30 to 40% of GDP. So it's the largest element in the national income statistics. So what happens in the energy sector is important. So since the energy sector has been on a decline, I say all of that to say that production has been declining since 2013. So if we want to talk about inherited...
So it's not overnight.
It didn't happen overnight. This has been taking place since 2013, the fall in natural gas production. Angeline and Jupiter, on which our hopes were banked to essentially give us a kick in terms of natural gas production, carried us we declined from 4.2 to 3.3 when Angeline and Jupiter came on stream between 2017, 2018, we moved from 3.3 billion cubic feet a day to 3.6 billion cubic feet a day. Now we are 2.6. That's a billion cubic feet of gas less a day. So you have to put that in the context. So we've been in slow decline in terms of production. Now, to say that the economy, therefore, they inherited a weak economy, the answer to that has been yes. But the economy has been declining since 2013.
How would you rate this country reserves, seeing that we have all this decline?
Well, if the energy sector is accounted for such a significant percentage of your GDP, and you know it's been declining for 13 years, right? Well, two things have to happen. One, you have to find more gas or oil. And if you aren't finding it, and nobody said that you shouldn't continue to look for it, but you have to start developing other areas to generate the type of export earnings that could supplement and or replace oil and gas. Now that's where Trinidad, that has been literally the business target and the business problem that Trinidad and Tobago has to deal with now, over the last 13 years, and for the foreseeable future, because we are also aware that there are other risks to come from depending on energy sector. We have to remember that climate change has largely been brought on by fossil fuels. So there's been a huge move away to what we call renewables, which is wind, solar energy, as alternatives. In those circumstances, even if we were to say that oil and gas are going to be a key part of our energy requirements moving forward, we also have to recognize that there are other systemic changes which are going to alter the demand equation. In other words, if people are going to generate and use more electricity, more energy from solar and wind, then they may want less natural gas and less oil. Now, that is a long-term threat to your business model. So even if we were to find more gas, we also have to recognize that there are other developments which threaten our future, right? So that the imperative is diversification and the development of alternative revenue sources, alternative export revenues, to keep the country on an even keel.
That was actually my next question, coming about economic diversification. Mr. Browne, we'll return with this topic just after the short commercial break.
Are you renewing your motor, homeowner or business insurances shortly? Then call Kalyani Limited, agency for Tatil, for a competitive quote. With 2 locations, Todd Street, El Socorro and 5 Rivers, Aruca. Please call us at 221-5051 or 227-5051. Kalyani Limited, agency for Tatil, building relationships exceeding expectations.
Who doesn't love a good story? Science is no different. Breakthroughs in medicine, technology, or astronomy didn't just happen overnight. It's stories of lucky breaks, hardships, biases, serendipity, and tragedies. Even stories that make you laugh. There were battles of ideas, sometimes lasting hundreds of years and even thousands, until we got it just right. So sit back and relax, grab that cup of tea, and join me as we explore stories from science.
Viewers on IETV, welcome, and those listening online and on iRadioTT.com. Welcome back, Mr. Browne. Before we went to the break, we started to talk about economic diversification taking place. How do you view that? Do you see that happening in the near future in Trinidad and Tobago?
Well, the answer is it depends on what we do. Let's put it this way. We were an oil exporting economy in 1974. We did attempt and we did transition into petrochemicals by 1979, 1980. And then we ran into a problem, a decline. price of oil fell. Not only the price of oil fell, the production of oil declined. And as luck would have it, we opted for the extraction and export of natural gas, in the first case, in the form of petrochemicals, methanol, ammonia, urea, in particular. Now, that was in the mid-80s. In 1999, 1995 to be precise, all right, 1995, the strategy would have changed. The intention always was the alternative export of hydrocarbons. In other words, we had one natural resource, which was underground mineral resource. It was oil, it was gas. And we were effectively converting the gas to what we call intermediate products. Ammonia is intermediate products. Urea is an intermediate product. Methanol is an intermediate products. They also have higher value addeds at the top end of those things. In other words, they go into the production of other items which give you higher prices per ton. And then somewhere along the line, we changed our plans. And in 1995, we entered into a contract for the export of LNG, which is a variation on our, if you want, our diversification plans. Rather than export products, we exported LNG as a product, as a base product. So the pricing is very different. The pricing per MMBTU or for cubic foot.
Cubic foot, yes.
Something in the region of about $3.50. Right? At the time, it was a lot lower than that. At various periods, it has oscillated between a maintainable price of about $3 to a high of about $14. But of course, that $14 price was a spike, and it didn't stay in position for very long. But the other point is that when you export LNG, you use it up faster. And from that perspective, the period of that diversification, we went from one staple, which was oil, to another staple, which was gas. And our production ramped up. We went with train 1, then we went with train 2, 3, and 4. So you could say that there was an effort at diversification, but it was not one what would call vertical integration. We were diversifying into a similar type product, and the volume of which started to decline. And it started to decline a little while ago. So how do we treat with that? Well, with great difficulty, not easy to get done. Moving into other areas, the other types of manufacturing accounts for about 6 or 7% of GDP. And we've been trying to diversify ever since independence. So we know that we've done well in certain types of, if you want, sugary type products, soft drinks, chocolates, snacks, as well as the export of certain types of bakery items. Now that and a number of other what you would call light manufacturing items. Now those only account for about less than 10% of GDP. And we said that oil and energy accounts for about 30 to 40% of GDP. Now those are big numbers to replace. What is on the other side of that? Services. So if we had to look at it, what are the products that we could export comfortably, and what would we need to do to do it, to change it? Well, everybody talks about tourism. We don't have the same type of beach structure or easy access to beaches as they do have in Grenada, for example, which is small, or Barbados. You'll find that the tourist havens in the Caribbean tend to be small. All right, we are larger. Cuba and the Dominican Republic will be a little different, but they have special parts of both Cuba as well as Dominican Republic, which are set aside for tourism, because that's where the beaches are, that's where the hotels are. We have never fully taken that on. So for example, Barbados.
We haven't grasped that concept here yet.
No, we haven't.
Even Tobago.
We're not clear. Well, we're not clear what type of tourism we want. That's the first part, right? And then we're not clear if we want tourism. That's the second part. But let's put it this way. Between Tobago and Trinidad, we have about 1,600 hotel beds of 3-star and above. 3-star.
Yes.
That's the sort of definition. And you want your 5-star, if you define 5 stars at what you call it, in terms of Trinidad and Tobago, Hyatt might be 5, but Hilton might be 4. They have brand name, which is important. Right? So, but how many hotel beds we have? 1,600. What do you need to maintain or to build a maintainable tourist base? Well, in the case of Barbados, Barbados has 6,000 rooms at 3-star and above. That's 4 times of what we have. Our tourism throughput is about 200,000 visitors a year. Most of them what we call short-term visitors. In the case of Barbados, Barbados has about 800,000 visitors a year, right? Compared to Trinidad and Tobago with 150,000. That's about 5 times the size, the number of people we have. That if you're talking about building a tourism industry, that's what you have to talk about, right? So you have to talk about building hotels. A hotel, 400 rooms. So how many hotels you need, right? Where do you place them? And then you have to talk about the ancillary products that go with that. Building a hotel, people don't only come in for sun, sea, and sand. Right? If you come for a week, I'm going to go to the beach every day? Not necessarily. What are the other things we're going to do to keep them busy, employed, and how do we make money off of it? Right? So that's the other part of it.
That's where the culture come in.
That's where culture comes in. I mean, but if you come to Trinidad and Tobago now, and I said, okay, Trinidad is the land of steel pan, right? And I want to go to a steel band and I want to hear a concert this week. But where would you go?
You have to wait until January or February month.
Well, I think the next set of concerts are somewhere
next year Carnival.
Or August. No, I think they're somewhere about August, September. It builds up from August to September. But the point is, here we are.
I understand.
The steel bands are not configured to do those type of performances. If we say Trinidad is the land of culture,
it should be throughout the year, you are saying.
Right, so you need things which take place every day of the week, Monday to Sunday, right? Similarly, right?
Just like Broadway have plays every day, every week.
You need all of those. You need all of those things. You have activities. So if we say we also have nature, for example, we have the Carney Swamp, we have the ibis, we have all different types of flora and fauna. Well, they have to be accessible. They have to have places where you could go and see them. You might not touch them, but you want to go and be able to see them. Well, you'll have to do a little better than the Carney Swamp visit at the moment, right?
Oh yes, that is a feeling point there.
Right, the infrastructure is not there. Suppose, for example, I like fishing, and I wanted to go fishing.
Yeah.
Well, do we have private charter boats that you could charter to go fishing? Right? What type of game fishing? Where do you go? Right? Those are the kinds of things that you have to build, right? Because you have to build activities. Right? People are not coming to sit down. They come in here for a week, so they want their week to be well spent. What am I doing on day 1? What am I doing on day 2? Where am I going? Right? There are traffic indicators, traffic issues, and so on. And also, too, you also then have the issue of crime. You don't want Trinidad and Tobago to be on a negative list or to be on some sort of advisory indicating that this is not a good place to go, because that affects your tourism market, right? I mean, consider one of the fallouts from what is taking place in the Middle East at the moment. By Iran attacking Dubai, Qatar, right? Those are what one would call transit hubs, right, to the rest of Asia. And by attacking those transit hubs, what is the first thing we know about? We know that air traffic has been ground to a halt. And I'm saying that we have the same problem here in the region, right? But I'm saying that that tourism is sensitive to safety and security. Right?
Of course, you want a safety net wherever you go.
Correct. So you don't want to hear about crime, you don't want to hear about murders, you don't hear about robberies and all of those kind of things. You want to know that there's a safe, secure environment and people welcome tourists, right? So you have to build that culture out. You're going to take time to get that in position. You have to Also, you have to build the activities, and the activities are not about, these are professional activities. You want people to be able to perform and perform at a particular standard. You don't want it at amateur level, right? So those are things that you have to build. You have to build a pipeline. Now, you have to move from 1,500 hotel beds to 6,000 hotel beds. Requires time, it requires investment, and it requires the development of all of those infrastructures. Right now, those are things that eventually come with time, but you have to make a conscious effort to do it. So that's just giving you an example with regard to one sector, which is one of the easier ones to do, if only because you look at it in terms of what is happening elsewhere in the region. All right. So it's possible for it to happen elsewhere in the region, then it's possible for it to happen here too. Right? But you have to put investment dollars behind it, right? And in terms of promoting it, you can't spend probably the budget for advertising for tourism in Trinidad is probably about 15 or 30 million TT dollars. Right? The budget for advertising in the case of Barbados is about 30 million US dollars, right? So that's a factor of 7 times where we are. Now, those are the kinds of things that you have to talk about. Now, that's diversification at one level. At the other level, one of the things that we know, what is taking place in the world? Well, the building of services. All right, Trinidad and Tobago is not going to be able to compete with a China or many countries in Latin America who all want to do the same thing that we are doing. All right? They want to build their economies too, and they want to diversify in the same fashion, except most of them tend to be larger than ours. Venezuela next door is 20 or 30 million people, not accounting for the ones who have left. Right? Colombia is 49, Brazil is 150, Argentina is about 45, then you have some of the smaller ones, which are 13, 14, 20 million. Right? But Latin America accounts for approximately 635 million people. In the Caribbean, we probably be knocking about 22, 24 million if we take into consideration Haiti and Cuba. All right, not CARICOM. CARICOM doesn't add up to a heck of a lot. So competing on the basis of what one would call manufacturing is never going to be a realistic option. First of all, we don't have the economies of scale or scope. What do we mean by the economies of scale? Meaning that there are many other things which are being manufactured in a similar area, right? So that, and we could be wide enough, we could produce with volume. 1.5 million people, our workforce is approximately 600,000 people. Well, from the size of our workforce, we don't compare well with any of the other countries that I just talked about.
That is why technical innovation is important and of utmost
technical innovation
importance.
And so on. So, right, where have we been? Well, our strong point has been in the energy sector, which is capital intensive, important, capital intensive, and not labor intensive. Right, but we do have 600,000 people to think about it. The majority of people are employed in services and the trades. So you have to, in terms of diversifying into different kind of business, our education system has to change. The skill sets that we're talking about need to change as well. And that requires a change in the education system, an emphasis on STEM. If we're talking about innovation, we're looking at certainly artificial intelligence, so we're looking at computer science and a number of areas along those lines. We're talking about offshoring, nearshoring, providing services to the largest economy, which is close to us, which is North America. We also need to consider how do we approach the Latin American economies in terms of our exports to that area. And our exports only recently have started to go to what one would call Spanish-speaking countries. And they've all been coming from what we call our light manufacturing sector. So from a thinking head point of view, diversification is a critical area. Now, how we diversify and what we diversify is going to be important. And
how we specialize labor, our labor force.
And how we specialize labor. Now, there's an interesting example from Barbados. Now, Barbados is a small economy, small country, right? less than 300 square miles, less than 300,000 people. Yet there is, in Barbados or out of Barbados, we probably have one of the richest men in the Caribbean. Now, how did he do it? How did that happen? How did he make Barbados not only his center point? He's a born Bajan, but he started off in the distribution sector, right? Supermarkets, and then he started buying and selling cars, right? But it's not only a question of what you know, it's also who you know. And he had made some friends at school, and he started selling a different type of car in the region, which we had not known about, Japanese. It's called Suzuki. And he not only was very successful at it, he also became the agent for Suzuki in the region. And because he did so well, Suzuki is not a big brand name, it's not a Toyota, it's not a Mazda, it's not a Nissan, right? It was called a lower tier brand, but he was able to do it successfully. And not only was he able to do it successfully, and was the agent for literally all of the Caribbean, right? But he became the agent for part of Latin America too, right? So he started, from Barbados, he was technically exporting to the rest of the world. Did they import cars and park them in Barbados and then travel them onwards? No. He became what one would call the normal indent orderer, which we have been, many of our economists have been vilifying. But hang on a second, this is a man operating out of Barbados that not only was selling cars across the region, he was selling cars across the world.
Yeah.
That's a different way of looking at it. Well, what did he bring to the table? What are the skill sets that he had that made him such an outstanding businessman so that he could probably be the richest man in the Caribbean? His name is not well known, so but he was my client, so I could speak about him.
Yes, I know you are from the banking sector background in Barbados. The Butterfly Bank, is it?
Caribbean Commercial Bank.
Yes.
And then Butterfield Bank. Right? I had the opportunity to be CEO of two different banks. But he, out of his position in Barbados, he saw a market opportunity, and he grew the market opportunity, right? Not merely as a distributor within the region, but as a distributor across Latin America. Right? And what most people didn't know is that eventually, when he generated generated that type of surplus, he generated that type of business. What else did he do? Well, surprise, surprise. He also had the largest dealership in China, right? The largest BMW dealership in the world was in China, and a man from Barbados owned it. Now,
it is refreshing to know it's a man from the Caribbean.
Correct.
Mr. Browne, let's take a short commercial break. For our viewers who don't know Mr. Mariano Browne, he has served as the president of both the Barbados Bankers Association and the Barbados Institute of Banking and Finance. We will be back after this short break.
In our lives, there are moments that need to be remembered. Are you hosting a Ramayana Yagya, religious or cultural event or celebration? Would you like to have it aired live on IETV or recorded for playback later? We will air your program on IETV and IE Radio, with your viewers joining locally and internationally. Your family and friends worldwide can view on www.ietvtt.com or listen on ieradiott.com. To make arrangements, call or WhatsApp IETV at 784-9880. Let us record your cherished moments and share it.
Welcome back, viewers, to Hotline with Ann Dookie on ITV. Mr. Browne, welcome back. That chat was so interesting, knowing that someone from the Caribbean can reach out so far and wide. But moving on to another topic, there's a general question in and out of social media, on the streets out there, the ordinary man on the street, that taxation have increased rapidly during this administration. What would you say about this?
Well, I think it's inevitable. You remember, we reduced taxation because the economy was expanding. And at the same token, revenues in other areas were going. Now, the public services have to be paid for by somebody. And if business is growing sufficiently, business would probably pay a higher rate because they probably benefit from it more than anybody else. And what do we call services, public services? Well, the fire service is a public good. Certainly healthcare is a public good, maintenance of hospitals. But when you build, well, how many new hospitals have we have? About 5? Right? Hospitals are cost centers if nobody is paying for them. And the other thing that's happening is that we are growing older, we are producing less children. I think our birth rate in the current age-bearing cohort, younger people, has been declining to somewhere in the region of 1 or 1.8, somewhere thereabout. Lower than, no, not 1.8. 1.8 would be allowable. It's about 1.8, I think. And for a country to maintain itself, for a population to maintain itself, you need a birth rate of 2 for every female. So if your average age of your population is increasing, then the age ratio, the number of people who are working to the number of people who are not working, is going to shift. Now, if the society gets older, then by definition, they'll need more social services, need more healthcare. As you grow older, you need more healthcare.
Of course, our population is aging.
Correct. And we're not producing enough people. So you will find that the burden is going to be shared largely by those who are working. And if that number is declining, we've reached what is called optimum population. Right? And after that, the population starts to decline. So only 2 things can change. One, if you want to be able to produce more, then your productivity must go up. Right? So you're talking about different attitudes to work, different skill sets at work, being much more efficient than we have been at every level in the society, right? The level of the private sector as well as the level of the public sector, because we don't want to keep the burdens down. If, however, we remain inefficient, particularly at public sector, then somebody has to pay the bill. All right? And who is going to pay the bill? All right? If the energy sector has been declining, it can be the energy sector, and that actually has been the model. We've tended to tax the energy sector companies heavily, then tax businesses next heavily, and in a sense, allow individuals different, if you want, allowances and so on, which mean that they may not bear as much of the taxation as possible. Now, if government expenditure is going up on social services, healthcare, the police want to get paid more, the nurses want to get paid more, the teachers want to get paid more, the public service want to get paid more.
Everybody want back pay now.
Everybody want what you call it. so that's the real trick.
They see the PSA get paid, so they want theirs.
Well, that used to be in the old days. It was one negotiating round for all. And what happened in the last go round is that the union said, okay, we'll take the 5% or the 4% or whatever, right? But if somebody gets more, we're coming back, which is where we are now. Now, I made a point to you that our gas production has been declining. Our oil production has declined a long time ago. That's declining too, right? So the revenue that's going to come from those sectors is less, especially if prices are falling. And we have been in that situation since 2014. prices in the energy sector have been declining. So where's the extra revenue going to come from if all of these services and everybody wants to be paid more, either to compensate for inflation or for the real changes in terms of just the underlying price effect, as well as the volume effect in terms of what we're doing? Well, it's going to cost money. Somebody has to pay. And by definition, how does government get money? Government isn't running a business, or they aren't running many businesses, and many of the businesses that government runs don't make money. So the bottom line is that you have to, in a sense, tax people who are working. And the burden of taxation generally falls on the people who are what one would call employed in the traditional sectors, and they're registered to pay VAT. People who fall out of it with people who are what you would call in the informal sector. In other words, they aren't generally registered with NIS or Inland Revenue. They all survive, and they don't have what one would call reportable, or they don't report income. Well, that creates a fiscal problem, because government expenditure is rising, as it will. Inflation affects government the same way it affects you and I. So to stay in the same place, if it does nothing else and it does the same thing it did yesterday, is going to cost more. If, however, you build 5 new hospitals, or you put up X amount, you do any other things, or you start over, you take it over another area, then that's going to push up your costs. All right, so the cost of government is going up. Individuals want more. Now, who has to pay for it? And the answer is government gets its revenue by taxation. It's not generating any revenue on its own, so it's going to tax people. Now, we've seen it. We've dropped the rate of the rate of taxation down to 25% for both companies as well as individuals. And then we expanded the bans, the non-payment bans for individuals from 75,000 to what? It is now 97,000, somewhere thereabouts. In other words, if you earn less than 90,000, and that's generally speaking with regard to what we consider to be the minimum income required to maintain life. So we said that if you earn 90,000 or less, or 92,000 or less, we won't tax you. Well, that means that those who earn more than 90,000 will end up paying more. And that is the difficulty that we have to deal with. So it's not a simple position. So if the country wants more public services, then it has to pay.
You have to pay
for it.
Of course.
Right? You can't complain about wanting more tax services, wanting more services and not paying for it. That's unrealistic.
Well, some people want it free. They want it at the mercy of the government. They think that they are entitled to it.
Well, that's a political problem.
That's political propaganda, yes.
Politicians have to face those issues, and they have to speak straight, right? In the realities, if you want more, you have to work harder, and in any event, you may have to pay more anyhow.
Of course, if you want to live in a comfortable house, you have to work and furnish it and so on.
That's the problem.
That's the problem.
So increased taxation is going to be a feature of our situation for a little while, until we face the issues of productivity in particular, and diversification as a second order condition. Those are 2 critical issues moving forward.
Mr. Browne, yes, moving on to this final topic before we go. We know on March 7th, the Prime Minister is meeting with Donald Trump in Florida. I'm seeing in and out of social media to and fro support for that meeting and some against. Are we at the mercy of the USA?
The answer to that is yes.
We don't know if the Trump administration would ask to establish another radar. That is left to be seen.
Well, we may not be able to do very much about that. Here's the problem.
Yeah.
Mr. Trump has changed things around the region. Mr. Trump has changed things around the world, as we all know. right? The war in Iran is a war of choice. We've not been able to address that issue. We don't have any control of that. There's a Professor Waltz from Harvard University who calls it predatory hegemony. Right? No, the US is the largest economy in the world. Not by far. China is pretty close to it, if not surpassing it as we speak. But it has the largest military in the world. And it has been around as a major power for 60, 70 years. In the process, it is in a position to make things work in its order. That's the reality. Now, small countries are not hegemons by definition. We don't have armies. We can't afford entanglements abroad, and we wouldn't be able to fight with North America. So either from a trade perspective or from a military perspective. So our foreign policy has to find a way to delicately tiptoe through those tall waters. Trinidad and Tobago's foreign policy has been built upon what is known as strategic ambiguity. What do I mean by that? Well, we have been friends to Cuba as well as friends to China. And if you remember it, I think that a lot of our projects over the last 15 to 20 years are not built by America or Americans. They're built by Chinese or with Chinese money. Yes? Fair comment, right? So we live in a world, and the Americans wouldn't give us any money, and they're not going to give it to us on cheap terms. So by definition, if we want to achieve certain development objectives and we want to borrow money, we have to basically borrow it from the best source that we can, right? Which means that we have to be friendly with everybody. Now, being friendly with everybody when the biggest man in the region wants to be unfriendly with everybody else and tell us that his friends are our friends and his enemies are our enemies puts us in a very, very difficult position. Now, how you find a way to walk through that is the stuff of politics and, if you want, backbone. Now, this is going to be a very difficult period. Trinidad has been able to establish relationships with China at the height of the Cold War in 1974. We've maintained positive relationships with Venezuela, notwithstanding North America has been breathing on Venezuela's neck. We maintain positive relationships with Cuba, notwithstanding the fact that American sanctions have been levied on Cuba for more than 62 years. Right? To all intents and purposes, Cuba is a nuisance. It poses no strategic threat to the US, neither does Venezuela. But in both instances, the US has taken a very negative positions towards both countries. Now, Trinidad could not afford to survive that type of pressure. So we have to find a way to tip through those very difficult waters.
So yes, we have to strategically meet the
Prime Minister. The Prime Minister has that problem. Now, how she does it and how it's what you call it, how is what you call it?
How she maneuvers.
How he maneuvers through that water is going to be very important.
Will be very important, yes.
And you will see, for example, from the front pages of the papers that there's pushback against lining up alongside North America with regard to the war in Iran. So, right, that says that hang on, the population is saying something. All right, we recognize we have to be close, but their fight is not our fight, so we don't have to go and line up behind them. Right, so those are the waters that the Prime Minister has to navigate. There are some difficult choices that have to be made and some very diplomatic nuances that have to be, how shall we call it, put on the table in terms of how we move through this difficult situation.
Yes, she will have to know how to tread very carefully. And just before we go off, over the 110,000 citizens who applied for jobs when the government recently had their job program, only 1,801 have been hired by the Ministry of Works and Transport. That adds up to about 9% of the 20,000 jobs the Prime Minister promised. Not to mention the 40,000 odd citizens who went on the breadline after this new administration took over. What are your thoughts on this before we go?
Well, that's when you overpromise and not deliver.
That is
Right.
simply political rhetoric then.
Yes, unfortunately. As I made the point, where does government get its revenue from? It gets its revenue from taxing its citizens. If it's going to hire more citizens without increasing or improving productivity, then by definition, it has to tax more. And that is reflected in the fact that the last administration and this run raised taxes on the financial sector from 30 to 35%. And then in this go around, then they put in an asset tax on top of it, which is really very regressive and puts the finance companies in a difficult position. But because they're presumed to be earning more than everybody else, then we should be able to take it away from them. Well, here's the problem. Right? It makes them less competitive and less efficient. And so the reality is that you're not going to, if the private sector is not generating any revenue, right, well, you're not going to be able to hire more people because your revenue is really dependent on their profitability and their ability to generate and increase their revenues. So you can't promise that you're going to hire 100,000 people. That's impossible. All right. So I think what the rubber is hitting the road where reality and economics are becoming, they're walking on the same street. You can't hire 100,000 people if you're not going to increase taxation. And even if you increase taxation, you still won't be able to hire 100,000 people extra. Can't happen.
And that is why we need to specify labor, and it starts from school up, training them into different sectors so we could increase.
The word for the future of Trinidad and Tobago is a thing that is not on your radar. It's called productivity. For government and for the private sector and for all employees employed in the public and private sector. That says nothing about hiring more people. That says that everybody has to produce more with what they have, more from less. That's the hard task, but that's the political task. And that's the message that has to come across. And if they haven't started saying it yet, they will have to in soon time.
Sure. Mr. Browne, thank you for your time and joining us. Let me just have your closing remarks in the last 2 minutes of the program.
Oh, my 2 minutes. Oh, dear. Well, thank you. All right. Well, let's just say that people get what they work for. All right. And Trinidad and Tobago, as an independent, small island economy, has to work harder because the world is harder. That's the reality. We don't have any control over inflation, so we have to produce more, whether it has become food security or energy security. And you can't tax yourself into wealth creation. Wealth creation is from innovation. Wealth creation is from people making independent decisions about their economic futures. And that means that we have to look outside and innovate in ways in which we have not done before.
Thank you so much, Mariano Browne, former Minister in the Ministry of Finance, former Senator and economist. This has been Hotline with Dookie. Thank you for joining us.